Welcome to the Microsoft Security Insights Podcast with your hosts, Franklin Grimberg and Edward Walton, where we discuss Microsoft 365 security and Azure security news and products. Recorded September 8th, 2021. Good evening, Franklin.
Good evening, Edward, on a 2-hour early show.
2 hours early. You know why it's early? Because we're not late. See? It's like whatever you're looking for is in the last place you look. That's how
For some reason, you seem to be in a good mood today.
I am in a good mood. You know why? Because I exist in the world.
You exist in the world.
I got all of my Microsoft certifications put back. My MCP number is back. They restored everything except for the SC200, which they claim I didn't show up to take, even though I got a receipt. But I am back in business. I will not fall for your trickery again to have my total existence erased. So
I want to let everyone know that I sent those Bitcoin too, that they failed, and I want it back in my wallet.
You can't keep Ed down. There is no amount of Bitcoin, Dogecoin, coin that can keep Edward Walton down. So they told me to wait 24 hours, and then I can go and schedule an exam. Who knew?
We'll see how it goes. We'll get the report back next week.
I'll probably score 127. All right. I'm going to write in answers for each question. I'm going to mark, and I'm going to write a comment about each question.
There you
And
go.
I'm going to put your name in it. Sure. So Antonio, you may not know, but Franklin is one of the major contributors to the SC200. So any gripes and grimes and grievances you may have about the exam, him. Plus, he also knows on a first name basis, the moderator, curator, and custodian of MS Learn, Mr. Brandon Nebs.
Neeb.
Okay.
But he was only certain exams. He did the SC200 and SC400. So
yeah, he's
I don't know what he's on to now, but yeah.
Really good guy. Great podcast last week. A lot of questions about certification, what was the experience, what was like. That the SC200 really tests what a SOC analyst is doing in the chair, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think you made a good point, Franklin, that the test is sort of like how you manage it, but we sort of suggested that maybe there should be an exam on how you deploy this stuff, right? Or do I have it backwards? 1 and 2.
No, there's respond versus deploy. But
yeah, respond versus deploy. Right.
So poor Brandon is never coming back on, because after we got off of Twitch last time, he had to sit there and listen to Edward for a half an hour to tell him how he wants to renumber all the exams and which exam should be what and so on.
I came up with a plan. I had it architected out like, you need to change all these exam numbers.
This should be the 196 exam for MCAS, 197 for MDI, 198 for whatever. I'm just like,
and then the 200 would be a composite exam. You can either go at the top, and if you pass the 200, you get it. If you don't pass, you can take the individual 4 exams that will give you that. And if you take it twice, the 200, and don't pass, you can't take it again. You have to take all 4 now.
Oh,
that's how I would do it. But I came from a world of testing in Novell, Cisco, Juniper. I came from a route switch. So those exams, those composite exams are hard, right? It seems like the product groups don't even talk to each other. They just sort of stitch this stuff together, right? And if you don't know how to flip your mindset between taking a composite exam to renew your CCNP, you got to be able to talk wireless, data center, voice, right? Before they separate it out where you could be a voice CCNP, a wireless CCNP, a security CCNP. So I don't go for those certs anymore. I think my CCNA is still valid on the wireless because that's the easiest one to take to maintain it. I couldn't pass a data center or a Cisco security exam right now.
I did look at the AZ700 Learn modules and went through that. That was actually really good. I enjoyed doing that and all the exercises in there. So
I did about 25% of it. I printed out the learning objectives and I looked through it. I'm like, yeah, I could pass this. I mean, that's how I started my career in Azure. I was a networking guy. So all I did was networking. Right? It's like, I was a little bit more modern.
All right. So the day after the SC200, I want you to do the AZ700.
It's still in beta. So I'm definitely going to take it and give it a shot.
500 questions later, right?
Yeah. So with that being said, Franklin, you do anything interesting before we get to our guest?
Absolutely nothing.
All right. I have an interesting MCAS thing that I was able to duplicate. Or did I tell you
Okay.
about it on the last podcast? We didn't. So in MCAS, there is a feature.
All right, that's enough for me. Let's get on to MDE.
He hates MCAS, and that's my thing, right? I'll share for the next podcast because I actually want to show it. But in the
Okay.
interest of time and time zone differential and respect to our guests, I'd like to go ahead and get started. So, to our listeners, supporters, Patreons, and everybody else that's trying to bite off our show, welcome to the Microsoft Security Insights podcast, where we are a show of highly opinionated facts. You can tell that I'm off my game a little bit because generally I'm drinking out of a red cup, but I'm having a pint in a regular glass. Listen to that refreshing sound, Frank.
I wished, but I just came from a heavy training, so today it's just like water on my big jug. That's it.
You're a run cyclist, both?
Triathlon, actually. So yeah.
Me too.
You too? Awesome.
I have not run today because I'm racing this weekend. So
Right.
5K on the evening and then half marathon in the morning. Interesting half marathon because it's all uphill. 1,200 square feet, 1,200 feet of elevation. So they drive you down to the bottom and you race uphill.
Ouch.
All right, so here, if you're ever in a race with Edward, don't follow him.
I will not. Thank you for the advice.
Get
Inside
ahead of
joke.
him and don't follow Edward.
So
Whatever you do.
especially half marathons because you'll end up running 18 miles because I went the wrong way.
Oh my goodness.
Right.
I mean, I would say that would be possible like in the trail running, but in a like road marathon or half marathon. Like...
The course marshal, I got gapped, and we'll definitely get started here. I got gapped because I couldn't keep up with the elites, but I was faster than everybody else. So I literally had anywhere between.
So you were alone? Was that?
I was alone. Yeah, I had at least 800 to 1,500 meters on the next person behind me, and we were running in the city. So you're taking there's. I didn't have any reference, and so there's something at the race called the King of the Hill. As you finish mile 8, you run up, and whoever can cross that mat the fastest wins the King of the Hill mile 8 in. So I crested, go down, and I'm like,
oh my goodness.
And the sign had blown over, and the course marshal rolled up on the bike, and I said, "Hey, which way?" She said, "Left." I said, "No, I'm part of the 615 group. I'm racing for prize." And she was like, "Yeah, left." I was like, so I follow her. I go around. And I see a mile marker for 4 miles, and the guy did, "Hey, you got an evil twin."
Oh my goodness.
So I added about 4.5, 5 more miles, and then I almost quit. And then I said, "You know what?" So I circled back. I saw a group. They had a little sign up, and I said, "What are you guys trying to do?" "Well, we're trying to get under 2 hours in a half marathon." And I'm like, "Not at this pace." I said, "Run with me, and if you guys can stay within 20 meters of me, I can get you under 2 hours. But we got to pick it up." So I said, "You got to run about at least a 7:20 pace. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to get this right. You guys are starting off too slow." I got everyone in hour, 59 minutes, and 30 some seconds. So out of 10 people, we lost 2. 2 of them couldn't keep up, right? But hey, that's the story of my life. So let's get started.
Just 1 second, because apparently Zoom is telling me that my gigabit internet connection is unstable, which is interesting.
All
right, cool, awesome.
So to our guests, we'd like to have on a very sharp guy that I am a fan of remotely. I watch his threads as he's answering questions, giving insights and everything. And I'm like, who is this guy? Always got something to come in on right here. So I started watching. I asked around. A couple of guys spoke very highly of you. I don't know if you know Matt Egan. I was talking to him about it. He said, "Oh man, you got Antonio on. You got a smart guy on." So I was just on the phone with Matt, a buddy of mine. So I'll allow you to introduce yourself. Anything you want to tell our listeners, supporters about yourself, feel free to share as much or as little, and then get into the topic that you want to talk about. I won't spoil it. I didn't tell anybody. It may be in our show notes or our title. But go ahead, sir. The floor is yours.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. So my name is Antonio Vasconcelos. A tricky name. I'm Portuguese. I live in Portugal, Lisbon. I'm 39. I've started working with in the IT field with 19 years old. So I kind of did a bit of a reverse path of start working first and then actually studying at night. I love technology and computers. Definitely, I'm a geek. I love definitely understanding the why of things. I think that's my main driver as both a person and a professional. Trying to understand the why of things and trying to bridge it with both business and the technology. And I think that probably around, I don't know, my 8th to 10th year of
He's now
experience.
frozen. Oh,
Is it?
Go ahead, try again. All right, now you're leaning forward. You're not talking. Now you're good. Go ahead.
Yeah, but I don't know what's happening here. Let me try to change camera to see if this actually is helping out, because
Eddie says he's just pretending to get out of the meeting. That's what Twitch chat is saying.
Yeah, it's really unusual. I have a gigabit connection, so it's really unexpected. I'm cable connected. So anyways, by that time, give or take, I had a chance to work with a company called SAS, not the airliner, but the statistical analytical software. And this is actually something that defines me as a person and also as a professional, which is through the 20 years of experience, I've kind of did a bit of everything. So I worked as a system analyst, security consultant, business intelligence architect. I worked as support engineer, customer care, pre-sales. I was a PFE for a long time within Microsoft. And I always have a goal to eventually work closer to the product.
You paused out again, but I do have a question while he's paused out. Have you ever done dynamics since you've done everything?
Oh my goodness. No, I mean, there's a limit for me. I think dynamics is definitely like something which is highly complex. But yeah, there you go. That and yeah, dynamics CRM, definitely.
Your career mirrors mine a little bit. I, short of being a DBA and writing code for money, I've broken it. You name it, right? I like to think I've earned my scars. I was talking to a colleague of mine, and I told him the first network I ever pulled was Lantastic, Artisoft, running Network 311 with Windows for Workgroups.
Ouch.
And then figure out how to network OS2 warp over token ring. Right. So
yeah.
The real
so
question is,
I like
did you
breaking.
ever play End Snipes is the real question.
Is that the game with the rats running around?
No, just little smiley faces and mazes, so you could check the performance, or as we used to say, we're just testing the performance of the network.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I may have an informal title of stress testing IPX for Novell, because we would play Wolfenstein and Duke Nukem. It would be dozens of us trying to make it work.
Yeah.
And I made it run over Cisco Catalyst 5505. So I learned how to switch before I learned how to route, sort of backwards, right? But hey, that's a very interesting background. So with all these things that you have done, what are you doing now?
I'm working as a program manager within a team called the Customer Experience Engineering, specifically the Customer Acceleration Team. Again, very fancy names. But again, as a PM within a large team that is creating the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint and the converged/unified experience of the Microsoft 365 Defender. So if you ask me again, what does CXE or CAT does, think about of we being the interface of engineering with highly strategic/design partners. And by that, I mean customers. We want to make sure that we are plugged in as much as possible, very close to those customers, working with them, understanding their scenarios, pain points, product gaps, feature requests, and ensuring that they have the best experience. And eventually, by working with these very strategic customers and very plugged in customers, that we improve the product for everyone else.
I know one of your colleagues, but do you work with Heike? You work with Heike? Right?
Yeah, it's the same team.
Same team. Okay, so I know that Interteam. Well, I see all the training and all the correspondence and stuff that comes across when I can make it, when I have to deal with pesky customers, right?
So I want to let you know that on the SC200 content, I was holding off as long as I could for the unified portal. Then I had to go ahead and write the content. We dropped the content on like a Thursday. That following Monday is when the unified portal came out. So all the SC200 content used to be based upon the separate portals, which drove me nuts. The other thing that I want to point out to you is, let me see if he comes back. He seems when you freeze, can you still hear us and you're frozen?
I can hear you. The image is freezing. Which is,
but if you can hear us, we'll just keep talking. So we just don't know if you can hear us. So one of the things, have you taken a look at the SC200 learning paths out there for?
Yes.
You notice that the first one is all MDE?
Correct.
How did you like that? How did that make you feel?
Very good. Very good. And actually, it's funny because I do get a bit of a questioning or a common question from customers on, okay, now that I have this product and you helped us doing like the amazing adoption of it, I want to make sure that my SOC, SEC, IT team, etc., they all are trained. So what's the path? And obviously, we point out first and foremost to the SC200. So that's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I made sure that MDE was not really just a subset of the M365 Defender and the training. It was a standalone learning path, just to let you know. So
because he's a big MDE fan, but not much MCAS. 2 questions: how do you spell MCAS, and how do you spell MCAS backwards? So one of the big things that we noticed is that after the exam, and I'm used to working all the portal. So to me, having multiple tabs open this way I've been doing business, that to me is my pane of glass, right? I have favors about where I'm stronger in and then others, and where I would start any type of SOC related work. I don't want to say incident investigation because sometimes it's proactive hunting, but give me a little bit of the mindset, the thought leadership, and the processes that says, hey, we're not trying to, I don't think Microsoft was trying to adhere to the single pane of glass, because I don't think we'll ever get to that, right? But hey, let's unify these portals. And if any parity is lost, right? Because sometimes I do find myself like, how do I do this? And I go right back to the old MDE portal, right? And I can get it. But I'm finding myself doing that much less now, because it seems like a lot of the stuff in the unified portal is manifesting and it's more intuitive. But one thing I also noticed, if you're looking for any updates, you got to stay in the unified portal, because if you don't go down to settings and see what's just manifest, you will not know. So give me a little bit of background on how, what, when, why, and if you can share challenges, to our listeners.
Definitely. Yeah.
So go ahead.
So I'm going to give you there's so many things, obviously, and I was not here from the get-go for every single product and every single challenge of each product. But based on the experience and the conversations and all of the thought process on the Converge portal, and it's still ongoing, by the way. It's a very big journey. It's not a thing that we actually ship for a quarter or a semester and it's done. But think about point number one of being agile and being capable of actually serving the best of breed solution for the individual segment that we were acting at. So if you want to do like CASB, or if you want to do EDR, if you want to do productivity, security, all of that, again, the agility in my mind kind of mandated that we followed separate tracks. While at the same time, obviously, you had that kind of goal, that kind of vision, long-term vision of eventually unifying those workloads. Not because of a single pane of glass. I mean, definitely that's important. That was a very big feedback that we got from several customers saying that it is not intuitive having to go through multiple portals, different URLs. It is not the best of the experiences, obviously, but more than that, it was really the ability of us having all of that data in a big data lake, so to say. I'm going to simplify this, not to go into very technical terms or internal things, but having that data mashed up to really, really take it to the next level. Naturally, we have threat intelligence and APIs for everything, and everything's kind of connected. But there's always the next level of that connectivity or integration of data. And you were asking about challenges. I mean, just try to look into data formatting along different products. Simple things like date and time. Eventually, they were differently represented, even sometimes with different variables in the backend, in MCAS and MD and MDO and MDI, whatever you can think of. So while actually integrating all of that data, kind of federating that data together, data uniformization was definitely like one of the biggest challenges. Like, how do you create actually the skeleton for things like universal alert or a universal incident? But the mantra was definitely, you were talking about having to fall back into MD portal, for example, to be able to accomplish X, Y, and Z. The mantra was that we were not going to do something if the level of functionality was not the same or better than you had it before. So when the actual GA of the portal happened, we had to ensure that everything was there exactly like you had it, or an improved experience. There was no downgraded experience. If anything else, what we actually supplied to the customers, and this is again the true story, is a much better experiences and a much better detection capabilities, hunting capabilities. You know, if you just look into the advanced hunting schema, you'll see that by yourself, obviously, with the added schema and the tables that we have for workloads that previously didn't have that ability from their own portals.
So one of the things that I very rarely get to geek out, we do so much learning in the travels of our job or our careers, right? But I'm a lifetime learner. My wife asked me to explain string theory to her one day. Like, come explain to me one more time what light year is and why we haven't got out our solar system yet. And I'm like, yeah, sure, let's sit down and talk about it. But when the new portal came out, I actually opened up Firefox and opened up Fiddler. And I started watching. I said, let me see where these things are actually going. So I had
very
one
different
screen
APIs. Yeah.
I wanted to see I wanted to see where it was going. I was like, okay, I see what they're trying to do here. This is going to work. Now I found myself 90% spending any time I have to work with our security workloads in the unified portal. Plus, I like the way that new features, functionalities, or evolution of it manifest when you go down and go into settings. And I go, oh, so now I can do this in that, right?
Yep.
I think the biggest thing was, shout out to Katrina Quick for making sure that I stay in the private preview in my own little lab, right? You know, first, are you in the PRP? I'm like, yeah, I'm in it, right? Give me yours, so and so. So now that I have the right tenant and org ID and everything else, I'm getting all the updates. I'm actually enjoying it. And I'm hearing good feedback from customers to say, this is getting close, but they have one thing that they wanted to do. So you go into settings and you slide it over that says automatic redirect. The customer would like an easier way than having to go incognito mode to be able to go to one of the legacy portals, right? They will love a button that would allow you to go to the old portal. I know that's sort of counterintuitive to drive, because if you allow people to keep going back, they'll never update.
Yeah, it's never going to happen.
It's never going to happen. I don't find it of a nuance. I just open up a private browser and I do it. So within the unified portal, and I don't want to get you in trouble with any other engineering group.
Hey, I'm about to start a fight with Sentinel, so it's okay. I'm ready for the Sentinel.
I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to touch that. I don't want the guys mad at me. But let me ask you this question. The different security portals for the different security workloads are there. I have yet to see MDI manifest in mine yet. I don't know where it is.
But that should be in MCAS where you do most of the work.
Yeah, but I could have swore I saw something that said it was going to be in there. Let me ask you this. How do you prioritize each section? You have the incidents and response and hunting up there, endpoints, email and collaboration. I forget what's at the bottom. is it up to the engineering group to submit certain API to their root portal or origin, and you guys just incorporate it in? Or who drives the ship? Who decides how this portal changes and looks?
Well, endpoint comes first, of course.
What else, right? I think that if you look into MD, it's not a question of being better or being a higher priority. It was just the fact that MD was more adapted to the actual baseline that eventually we wanted to snap into. Like again, the events hunting, auto IR, incidents. So it was something that the other workloads eventually had to incorporate more as a core work than MD had to eventually accomplish. So if you ask again why or how we drive that prioritization, it was first and foremost based on readiness of each one of the workloads, complexity of the work that we have to do to eventually reach that stage of where we can actually define that the workload is ready to be converged. And you just pointed out something like MDI and MCAS. And as you know, like MDI and MCAS actually almost were acting as a single product for quite a while now, right? With the unified experience also. I think that was the name. So a logical step is obviously when I talked about the data federation and what can we actually do better with having all of that streamlined data available for us to do the threat intelligence improvements. That could be like new detections, because eventually we have better ways of doing things like alert to alert, event to event, alert, event to alert, like whatever combination you can think about. There is definitely a work of understanding what are we going to port into the converged experience. Like, is there any conflict between MDI alerts and MCAS alerts that eventually they're going to be duplicated? Do they need to be deduped? How is the structure of the existing alert in how it actually has to adapt to the universal alert schema? What kind of entities are we going to populate into the incident schema? So there's a ton of work that eventually goes into the prioritization and the costing of that, the budgeting, obviously, the resource allocation that defines the timelines and the dependencies that we have.
So,
go.
With that being said, let me set a qualifying parameters before I ask the question. Let's assume that there are no external data sources coming in. Everything is Microsoft centric, right? So we're not using Ceph, we're not using syslog. Unified Portal Sentinel. If the customer is using Sentinel and they're ingesting, process no object, they just haven't brought in an external data sources just yet, but they're pulling all their Microsoft workloads. Which one? Would I go to Sentinel or would I go to the Unified Portal? And part two.
Now you're the one that's picking the fight, which I was going to pick, but that's okay.
Oh, okay. I'll leave the second question I think you're going to ask to you, Frank. So what do you say, Antonio? If I got Sentinel and it's ingesting, I got the data connected up and it's pulling stuff in, incidents are manifesting, alerts, where do I go?
That's a simple question, or a simple answer, actually. We see it in a much more simpler way. And I get it that eventually at the beginning, I'm going to be very, very honest, I actually had a couple of escalations from a couple of customers that when they went through our marketing materials, and mistakes happen, right? We had a couple of articles saying the next generation SIEM M35 Defender. and obviously that is going to create some kind of aggravated situations, because if you just acquired Azure Sentinel, it's not going to be easy.
I always poke at Rod Trent saying, why do you need Sentinel if you have the unified portal? So I always poke at him about that. So that's funny that they did that.
Exactly. Like creating the problem without actually having the problem. But the point is simple. I mean, the way that I personally kind of pitch it to the customers that eventually I have a discussion with, or anyone else, is first and foremost, it depends on the maturity of your SOC. How mature are you in that threat hunting kind of level matrix that There's a kind of a template baseline out there for the industry of where you are in terms of hunting overall, like proactive hunting, and how much eventually do you require to customize the data points that we provide to you as a service? Because the point here is almost like Office 365. There's an element of the service that it's packaged, so to say, right? We're giving you a closed service. There's an extensibility layer to it, but it's limited. Yes, you have advanced hunting. Yes, you have custom detections. Eventually, you can do things like alert suppression. But if you want to generate actually more complex detections, like with Fusion, for example, you want to add your own logic, more complex logic based on things like notebooks and AI and all sorts of automation. Even if you're not ingesting Ceph or syslog, but probably you are, I don't know, like bringing alerts, let's say simple skeleton XML alerts from your proxy firewall. That's exactly where the next-gen SIEM, Azure Sentinel, fits into. Like it's specifically, again, the way that I see it for more mature / advanced SOCs, or eventually the ones that are climbing that ladder of maturity and increasing their level of proactiveness, and eventually also tailor or tailoring of their own detection and automations and response, because that's not going to be within the remit of the Converge portal or whatever workload that we provide to you as a service. Again,
so let me jump in here, and because I think that we have to look at the time, right? Because first of all, it was not too long ago that basically you could only send alerts to Sentinel, not the raw data, and you would generate a completely new incident over in Sentinel for what was going on, which to me seemed like, and that was the recommended approach on the connector, which drove me nuts that they said that was the recommended approach, right? I'm like, okay, basically what you're saying is send all this stuff over, send the alerts to Sentinel, and create a completely new incident and ignore this purpose-driven UI created in Defender for Endpoint, securitycenter.microsoft.com, whatever. It didn't make sense to me, right? Because I'm like, why give up on the purpose-driven UI and create a new incident record?
That makes no sense. That's not the strategy. Exactly.
So now, since we have the new connector, which is bi-directional updating of the incident, and you're getting the raw data over, I have to change my thinking on that, right?
Yep.
And you also have the button that will jump you over to the Defender or the unified
deep
portal
links.
to then use the purpose-driven UI to do what you need to do. Plus the expansion of the entities within inside Sentinel allows you to hook more things together or whatever. So
exactly.
From where we were at a year ago, it does change the way that we have to think about this, right? But what we don't want to lose is the purpose-driven UI that is the unified portal for us doing response in those areas.
Again, it's more than the UI and the UX. Right? It's actually, again, the service that we are providing to you. A good example is, and again, if we kind of segment this into maturity levels, how mature are you within your SOC in terms of automation and orchestration? I mean, you have 0, you have like 100% of that automated. And if you grab AutoIR, again, automated investigation and remediation from within the Microsoft 365 Defender, and like I said before, MD was already a step further because actually, again, we kind of drove the AutoIR from there, and the other workloads are now following up and adding their own capabilities on top of it. Exactly, because we now have that higher flexibility and ability. But the point is really that, like you're stating, we are supplying a baseline of the service, and we're trying to always increment and improve that baseline of service. And eventually, if we can take some of that effort or challenges off your plate and simplify your life, by all means, we'll try to do it. Exactly for then you to be able to focus on the more niche, unique scenarios that you have within your organization. And that's exactly once more where the extensibility and the customization capabilities of Sentinel come into play. because we're
So-
not in the business of creating that
Right.
customization capability. We're in the business of providing you a as a service threat intelligence product, auto remediation, vulnerability management, and so on and so forth.
So
Mhm.
something off topic real fast, but you're talking about customization. I'm very confused about if we should be using the Graph API or the APIs provided by Defender for working with the data.
Exactly like the Sentinel example that you gave, where at the beginning we didn't have the connector, and now we have it, and now we have the raw data, and instances are bidirectional. It's always a question of a journey. So hang tight, we're getting there.
In regards to the unified portal, it's getting better, but I still see a lag. So how, or is there documented time between investigation and closing their alert? Because MDO, and I thought that MCAS was noisy. MDO is just noisy. It's like, I got something to say and I'm going to let everybody in the world know, right? What is the bidirectional incident closing? Has it reached the point where if I close something in Sentinel, it shouldn't take 24 hours before it closes in the source?
No, it shouldn't. Definitely, it should be way more agile and way more quicker. If customers are eventually seeing that, they should report to us.
Okay, all right.
For us to investigate. Yeah.
And 24 hours is a little extreme. Let's be more realistic. I did something. I went back 2 hours later, and
it's not changed.
hadn't refreshed. Yeah. And I refreshed the browser to say, let me see something, because I run multiple browsers. I'm thinking, well, I don't know. Is there a common call that just crawls each source product and then closes out the unified portal? Or is it just randomized? As you do it, it makes a call. Hey, do you have anything new? Yeah, you close those out. I close it out. I see it on my side. Is it, and random is okay. Right?
No, it's definitely not random, but it's a bit more complex of a logic, specifically also because of another important point, that even after an incident is created, it can eventually be redirected to another incident.
Oh,
so let's say that you have 2 open incidents. Again, none of them are closed. And again, I'm not going to sell the snake oil and say that AI and automation and everything is like amazing. There's always a level of challenge on data correlation, and often it might be the case that we get the data points that we need later on because I don't know, the machine was offline, and then we got more indicators, more attack vector indicators, more techniques, whatever that is, to paint the picture that we're trying to paint, and ensure that, okay, instead of this being 2 separate incidents, it's actually the same one. So what do we do then? Let's say we scavenge one of the incidents that we determined as the child one. Those resources go into the parent one, and this one is closed, and there's a redirect ID, right? From incident B to incident A, for example. And this logic has to be accounted for within Sentinel. So it has to go and kind of look into any changes, redirections. Do I have to, again, eventually kill an incident or close an incident within Sentinel, ensure that the data points were then merged into another one? But it shouldn't be definitely in the hours time frame. It's much more quicker. And if you're seeing that, please do report to us.
Oh, well, in my lab, it's a hodgepodge of stuff, right? So it couldn't, and I have yet to look at the ASC demo lab. I don't even know if Matt Lowe or Chris Bohm is still managing that or not. I actually don't know who's doing it now. But it wasn't problematic. It's just that when you are aware of something, you're looking and you're just trying to compare. But the fact that it did work, and it wasn't 24 hours, I just threw it out there. I came back and like, oh, okay, maybe it just needed for me to do something that I did not do, and they made a call.
No. It should be like completely seamless for the SOC and for whoever's investigating. So actually, sorry, just to add a point here, which I think it's important. The biggest challenge that I've actually seen from customers is when they have a 3rd stage or 4th stage after Sentinel, which is like their ticketing system. And this is where things eventually get a bit more complex because they have to account with those factors like the incident merge and redirection happening in Enterprise Defender, syncing into Sentinel and eventually having to do that in their own ticketing platforms. And again, the consumption of the APIs from Sentinel, ensuring that they are consuming the right properties within the XML to see if the incident was redirected or not. Those are the kind of challenges that I'm seeing more and more, because customers often, they actually pivot at the, let's say the ticketing system to start the investigation and assign it to someone, which then someone then gets the assignment in Sentinel. High level investigation is done, and then if necessary, which often happens, they will have to go into the unified port for deeper investigation.
Yeah.
So some of the features and functionality with inside MDE, since you're working with customers, from a forensic standpoint, how many of them are using live response, or is that not an area you're looking at?
Yeah, a lot of them, and it is a change of mindset. And definitely, I'm not saying that we're done with live response or the forensics capabilities. We're always looking into areas where we can improve that and bring more capabilities out of the box, or improve like the overall coverage of what live response could do for customers. But there is a bit of a change here of the mindset shift. Like I said, if you're looking to live response, where now we give you the ability to create your own stuff with PowerShell. And often customers will ask us, can you give me a script for this or a script for that, or why don't you have this option built in? It's not that simple, right? We're not trying to conquer the world with MD and trying to do everything that eventually other products out there do in their own niche areas. We're still a EDR / now XDR, obviously, with the Amplified Defender. So we have to understand the battles that we obviously pick.
Okay. And you can't, when people say you can't boil the ocean, you can. It's been proven, meteorites. You can boil the ocean.
Yeah, those kind of nature events. Yeah.
What features in MDE do you see people not utilizing that they should be utilizing?
Oof. So MDE is a suite of capabilities, right? It's, let's say, EDR, EPP, the TVM bits, the threat and vulnerability management, threat analytics, auto IR. There's a bunch of pillars there. And there's definitely a level of adoption for things that happens first. EDR is simple in terms of adoption. Again, onboarding devices and getting data and alerts in, it's simple. Again, then triaging those alerts and incidents and understanding how to deal with them, that's another stage. But definitely there's the EPP area, which I think for many moons, it's getting way better now.
What is EPP?
So I'm sorry, the endpoint protection.
Okay. And what does that include?
That includes things like the AV anti-malware.
Okay.
So again, the behavior monitoring, that includes attack surface reduction, which is by itself another umbrella. Things like ASR rules, control field access, network protection.
Well, a lot of customers avoid that like the plague, because they go, well, I don't see this inside the unified portal or the MDE portal. Oh, that's Microsoft Endpoint Management.
Yeah. Why isn't TVM in Endpoint Manager?
Why is TVM not in Endpoint Manager?
Yeah.
Well, because first and foremost, it is a discoverability piece. Then, like the second stage is actually the remediation component.
And who does most of the remediation?
Depending on the customer, you might have specific teams, like let's say application owners, specific infrastructure owners that are accountable for their own services and devices that have to do the remediation. Or at least keeping tabs with their auditing, compliance, vulnerability score, so to say, and then eventually creating the change requests for the servicing team that exists.
Mm-hmm. So when you take a look at, I'm going to focus in on MDE and customers, they're focusing on like, okay, we've got XDR in here. What happens if something really bad happens on the machine? Do you expect the forensics capability of MDE to allow them to do what they're doing, or do you see them set up another way to be able to do the forensics on the machines? I mean, what level of like when something really bad happens that MDE might not have picked up everything? How do you see customers handling that, and what is MDE's role on that?
Yeah. So there's various scenarios there. Let's go through the more simple one. You have the machine already onboarded for quite a while or a while in the service. You have data coming in, like telemetry data that is collected from the device. It's data in the timeline. You probably have alerts. Most definitely something really bad happened. And then you're going to start investigating that. So the alerts, the incidents, pinpointing the data in depending on the routes that you might, end up taking, you should actually then go into live response and collect whatever you need. And again, through that extensibility track of PowerShell, you can actually do whatever you want. Like you want to extract a memory dump live, you can actually have a script online on how to do that with third-party tools. You want to upload it into Azure Blob Storage, by all means. No need to partition the data because we have limits for live response uploads. Naturally, right? Again, we're a kind of a closed service as a service. You want to do like extraction of MFT. You want to do, I don't know, process them, process inspection. Everything is possible. It's just really a question of eventually adapting your existing processes or the requirements of that forensics team into the technology that you've just acquired. Not sure if that provides you the evidences that you needed.
So one of the big things that are maybe the top 3 or within the top 5 buzz things at Microsoft right now is zero trust, XDR, and a few other things. But I want to touch on XDR. I come from the Sentinel world, and I'm doing MDE, and I consider that XDR. But I've been corrected a few times to say you have to include MCAS in that. In your opinion, is MCAS should be part of the XDR conversation, or is it exclusively a combination of MDE and Sentinel? There's no right answer, but I've seen marketing material, I've talked to people, and they're like, oh no, that's separate. Some individuals consider MCAS more S&C, security and compliance, rather than detect and respond.
It's a quite vast product. It is, and actually, if you look into the bigger marketing circle that we have, and I'll find a slide here to share with you. You'll see that there's more components within that XDR plane. Again, Azure Sentinel, Azure Defender, and then obviously the MT5 Defender, right? So it's a bit more than just Azure Sentinel or MD.
Will the unified portal ever become tenant aware so that you can put a pivot button on the unified portal that automatically take you to Sentinel? Meaning that based on your login, like, oh, okay, this person decides they wanted to pivot over rather than open another tab. Or is that just another button to junk up the unified portal not needed? Me, I just opened 2 tabs. Literally, I work in 2 tabs now: unified portal and the Sentinel tab. Is there any integration that's in effect or even needed to do?
That's a good question. I mean, if we have the correct scenarios and flows that eventually requires us pivoting customer from the unified portal into Sentinel, by all means, we'll do that deep link integration like we have the reverse right now between Sentinel and the MT5 Defender. It is tenant aware. I mean, Azure Sentinel and MT5 Defender is within the same tenant.
Excuse me for not knowing. I need to open. I'm trying to get in my portal here. Inside the MDE portal, there is a queries and shared communities and shared queries and everything else. That's in the unified portal, right?
That should be in the unified portal, yes, because the GitHub that hosts that, or those community queries, that is definitely within the unified portal.
Okay, so it's in there. Okay, I'm just reading through some questions that I had to make sure I stay on top.
I mean, I can double check. Often we kind of assume these things as granted, but I can double check.
And believe me, my environment is nowhere near pristine, so it probably does work.
And this is a challenge. Like often we live in these development rings, and we see so many other things that folks don't see out there, and it kind of catches you sometimes. But we're definitely looking into improving the experience of that community queries into the advanced hunting. And there is actually already some of the new features for advanced hunting. Not sure if you checked it, for things like tabs. This is already in public preview, so I can discuss it. Like a long-term ask was actually the ability to have tabs within advanced hunting. That's there in the unified portal. If you have a public preview tenant, you should see it. And a better arrangement of the schema and the queries, your queries, the shared queries, etc. But we're obviously looking always into improving that experience of the community queries, eventually looking into the ability of having things like check-in, check-out queries capabilities, so that you can actually lock, let's say, your custom detections and auditing controls. All of that eventually is getting there.
Okay. So I've noticed something, and by no means this is scientific. It seems like the unified portal is getting faster. Is there any prefetch or anything else that's doing it? Because I remember, or are you guys just cleaning up the internal UI back-end code? Because I used to get into it and even expanding things out slow. Now it's fast. It's like really fast.
Yep.
So are you guys reducing that Visual Studio UI stuff?
Yeah, the amount of libraries and frameworks. No, it's optimization work that obviously has to happen and has to continuously happen.
Okay.
Like the APIs that we have in the backend, querying the necessary components and painting that. But yes, the UX is also changing. There's a lot of improvement. And actually, if you check things like incidents versus alerts, you'll definitely see, like with your own eyes, the difference. Like the text box or the checkbox or the drop-down boxes, they're all very different. There's a big alignment happening in things like React to ensure a faster experience for customers.
So we're using React on the back end. Okay, Node.js. All right, well, that explains it, because it's just like, okay, maybe my computer's cleaner, I've updated my browser, but this is fast now, right? Being able to bounce around. Frank asked this question earlier, what feature or functionality inside MDE or whatever that you wish customers would use more? But let me ask a two-headed question here.
Or actually, he asked which ones were more complex, where customers were having more challenges, and actually went into EPP, but I didn't mention specifically which ones.
Okay.
Attack surface reduction rules is a very misunderstood feature. Unfortunately, it's getting better. Again, it took a bit of a work from our side, and obviously, I'm not discharging all of the blame. It's not the point. I mean, there's always a bit of a mea culpa here from our side on the way that we eventually document things or pitch things or present things in the UX, or even the integrations with things like Endpoint Manager, reporting. All of that is being improved, definitely. But I think it was a bit misunderstood because we have a different way of doing things. And this is something that I have almost like a core thing within myself, that each time that I see something different, I try to look at it from a different lens and not doing whatever I'm used to do. And this is almost like a message that I give to all of the customers that eventually I interact with. Don't try to do mip mapping of one-to-one feature, or I have this feature in my existing workload or my existing product, and I want to be able to do that in your product. Because often it might be the case that we have a different approach on how to actually deal with that problem. In ASR rules is exactly a very big or good example of that. Instead of we providing you the framework for you to create your own detections and suffer ages in creating those and maintaining and updating, and eventually also putting all of your endpoints to a crawl because of the performance impact. We actually thought about how can we help customers from the get-go in a more simpler way, an effective way for what really matters. So looking at the threat landscape, what are the top things that we actually see in terms of attack surface? What are the top things that eventually our customers would benefit from? And creating those rules and updating, improving those rules, and eventually generating new rules as the threat landscape evolves. But in a way that we kind of prescribe you that, and you just have to see where and if again, you can enable them in your estate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm
gonna pivot off. Well, go ahead, Frank.
well,
I'm sorry.
I'm huge into ASR, big time.
That's awesome.
And that's the thing that I've been pushing and pushing and pushing, because it's
Mhm.
like, if you let me run PowerShell
Yep.
from a document, it's game over.
Yep.
That's the bottom line. One of the things I just did this past week for another project is I took the Word document that you can download as like tutorial 3 or whatever,
Mhm.
and I decrypted that and took a look at it to see what they were doing. And basically, it's it's PowerShell with a hashed or encrypted file, and then they do a scheduled task. So it's kind
Yep.
of funny to take a look at the code behind, which is a pretty standard attack out there. So and ASR is going to stop that attack from happening.
Yep.
The thing with ASR that sort of blends over in the lifecycle guys, System Center, Intune/MAM, like, well, we have security baselines,
Mhm.
right? And we have these things. So let me ask a question. I don't know the answer to this. Which takes precedence? ASRs, if you, and I hope I'm saying this right, you can initiate ASRs.
So there's actually not a precedence in the way that they are compiled in MEM,
Okay.
but
Okay.
they eventually can conflict.
Okay.
So let's say if you have the security baseline, which has a subset of the ASR rules, because again, not all of them eventually are going to be recommended for the majority of our customers, right? And then you go and create another profile for your Windows 10 devices, and you push another set of those ASR policies, that's going to conflict. So the guidance there is, if you want to make use of the baselines, which you should, just ensure that when you customize a specific policy for ASR, you're not actually conflicting with the other already configured settings.
So
Okay.
we talk about ASR and ASR rules. Is there a difference between ASR or ASR rules, or is that the same thing?
It's ASR is like an umbrella of capabilities. So it's seen as the umbrella of ASR rules, can fulfill the access, the protection. So everything that eventually
guard, application control, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So everything that we eventually design and develop in that specific objective of reducing the attack surface.
So how do you see, because this is one of the things that we dealt with in SC200, is the fact that the security person is not responsible for the endpoint. So that's why you're doing all of that stuff. I mean, so the collaboration with the endpoint people to push that through. How do you see that relationship happening in the enterprise organizations that you're dealing with?
Very, very tight. And that's exactly, again, another big clash that we have when we say that the integration or the connection between things like MD and MEM is a live thing. It's a live thing. What should be, let's say, the strategy or the precedence or the urgency or the criticality of a given ASR rule? If I'm not having at least a bit of insight or a knowledge input from my SOC team or my forensics team or my threat intel team or my red team, whatever, on what are the top things that my environment is more susceptible to. So this is definitely something that I see in tandem, right? That specific input of, or even like just the simple question of me as a sec admin going back to my SOC team or my red team or threat intelligence team and just asking them, hey, can you help me prioritize these rules? Can you actually tell me based on the data points that we have, like the alerts, the incidents, what are the top things that we need to look into, right? Or even like the pen testing exercises that were conducted. This is exactly what often I recommend customers like, because they will tell me or ask me, what is the recommended order of the settings or rules to enable? I mean, it depends. I mean, are you using macros? Right. I mean, we do have customers that eventually are not using macros or are using only digitally signed macros, a very small percentage, unfortunately, but this is the reality that eventually we do encounter. So if you're not using macros, probably you don't need any of the rules that protect you against macros. Go.
Where are we at with Defender for Endpoint for Mac and Linux?
Well, that's a very vague question. Let me try to explain this from a high level. So where we are, is that the question again, right? We do have EDR, AV, behavior monitoring, and many of the features for these two platforms. Obviously, they came in a bit later because that was part of the strategy, and Windows was the initial focus for many reasons. But we now have a encompassing platform that takes care of Android, iOS, Linux, Mac OS, and Windows down level server and everything else eventually.
So I got a note here. One last thing I wanted to ask. How does MDE Windows 11 affect how you guys operate, as well as this MDE P1 offering?
I was going to ask about this, so this is good.
So there's Windows 11, there's P1. Two different questions, is that it?
Yes.
Yeah.
So how does Windows 11 affect how you go about your business? Is it more secure and more integration? So just by firing it up, it talks in a manner that's more secure as far as information telemetry capabilities. And then is this in line to this offering that I've seen now for MDE P1?
Two distinct topics, but eventually they drive the same objective. As with every iteration of Windows, and Windows as a service, by the way, a big driver for it was exactly security, because it allows us to do architectural changes in a more agile form, exactly to mitigate, let's say, exploits, attack surface from the core of the OS, instead of just adding shims on top or trying to mitigate things without actually changing the root cause of eventually that exploitability or that attack vector. If anything, again, each time that we launch a new OS, and Windows 11 is just another representation of that, we try to look into what are the next things that we can, one, enable by default that we had before, two, introduce as a new baseline to elevate the security stance of our customers, and that can be like enterprise customers or consumers. So if you look into Windows 11, there's definitely a ton of new features that we're going to introduce as part of that baseline. But even within Windows 10, we did exactly the same thing. Just like Credential Guard is a good example. I mean, we've tested it since the almost like the launch of Windows 10. Obviously, going through enterprise scenarios first, the more complex ones, up to the point where we gained that confidence to say that we're going to enable it at each bare bone kind of installation or rebase installation of Windows 10. I think it was RS4, RS5 onwards that it was enabled by default. And the same thing happens with eventually things like code integrity, again, hypervisor code integrity. It can be eventually with, which we are doing, the AV containerization. It was a long time that we announced that, but again, it's baby steps to ensure that we have that compatibility, reliability, so that we expand it to everyone. So Windows 11 is just, again, another stage of redefining the baseline of security.
So if I'm running virtual machines inside Azure, and I'm using Azure Security Center or Azure Defender for servers, should I install MD?
You should definitely, yeah. Okay. It's a complementing thing, right? Okay. Just look into how we actually drive a much more deeper EDR lens. We give you the vulnerability management data points now with TVM. So again, as part of that XDR all-up experience that I was mentioning before, it's not only Defender for Endpoint or MDO. It's again the Microsoft 365 Defender, Azure Sentinel, Azure Defender that makes up that holistic approach of Microsoft security.
All right, I got two questions for you. With TVM, is there any need to actually have other vulnerability scanners, or can people remove that cost in their environment?
Definitely. I mean, there's no need for that.
Okay. Now, Azure Virtual Desktop, now they also have this other service, I can't remember the name of it. In Azure Virtual Desktop, which used to be Windows Virtual Desktop or whatever.
Microsoft Managed Desktop's the other one.
Okay. does MDE come automatically installed on that? How do you manage that with machines that are disappearing? What is the whole forensic side and configuration side of that if MDE comes with it?
So if you're talking about VDI in pooled versus non-pooled devices, I think that's the core of the question.
Does MDE even come standard with Azure Virtual Desktop? Can you get it with Azure Virtual Desktop?
You can. We do support things like WVD, for example, and we support VDI infrastructure. So definitely customers can enable that. The question of licensing is a different question, right?
Okay.
But from a non-pooled device, and I think that's where the question is coming from, specifically for that forensics point of view. When we onboard the device, we look into a extensive list of attributes, whether that is like soft or hardware attributes, including like hardware identification, like motherboard, CPU, or whatever. We can get to build a GUID, a unique identifier of that device in the service. If you're obviously generating like hundreds, thousands of VMs every single day, and they are short-lived, again, non-pooled, or pooled that is, I'm sorry, that's going to generate an amount of, like a huge amount of objects in MD. And those objects will stay there because from a security standpoint, we don't allow those devices to be deleted. Again, it's forensics data, and it should be there. The devices will end up showing as inactive. But before that happens, it takes like 7 days for the device to show as inactive. And often that could kind of confuse people because it's a recommendation that I'm going to give now. People shouldn't be focusing that much on the device inventory for threat hunting or incident response. It should be a pivot once you actually go into incidents and alerts, you pivot into the object that was associated with that specific incident or alert. But the final answer of this is we have specific scripts, ways that you can actually generate a single GUID for all of those devices if eventually they have like same host name, for example. And all of the telemetry goes under a given object.
So if there is,
I think I can see that now. That's a slide button in MDE right now, right? Is that scope incidents or something like that?
No, that's a different thing.
Okay.
It's actually on the onboarding script. We have a specific script for VIs that you add like a auto start of the VM, and that onboards the VM while the VM is starting for the first time.
Is there any thought of if there is an incident, an open incident on a machine that is then quarantined, that machine then is preserved, so then you can go back and do forensics on it?
So you can definitely isolate the device.
You can isolate the device, but what happens if, because it's, in a pool, it's recycled, whatever, how can you stop the recycling from happening?
Well, you cannot stop it from MDE. That's eventually a process that the customer would have to build to ensure that they have a response action as part of that requirement of the forensics team.
So there's nothing out of the box that's going to happen. Hey, listen, this has been marked as compromised. Let's just call it.
Well,
the device is
live
compromised. And then I don't want this machine to be recycled or no matter what. It needs to be stuck in storage somewhere so I can work on it. There's nothing really out of the box for that right now.
No. Eventually, that'll be like through the extensibility that we have of APIs, whether it is for Azure Virtual Machine and M365 Defender. But eventually, the way that I can see that work would be through live response, and you collecting a live memory dump of that device to Azure Blob Storage, and just be done with it.
Okay, great.
So we're going to close the show out here a little bit, respectful of everyone's time. I know that Franklin.
And I have a few things for you to talk about after the show.
Yeah, so we're going to close. I'm going to ask you a quick question. Sysmon, yes or no? Do we need it? I mean, MD has been lifting weights, got his weight up, has been training hard, it's in zone 3 or 4, I'm riding. Why do I need Sysmon?
It goes back to that level of maturity that we were talking at the beginning. I mean, do I need a next-gen SIEM? Do I need a SOAR, which eventually Azure Sentinel does both, right? Do I need extra data points? do I have any specific scenario within my organization that is unique or is not being covered by that specific tooling? Again, the tool is built trying to cater. I have this analogy in my mind. I always remind myself of the Windows 10 start menu and how a software developer once told me that it's very hard for you to actually order a pizza and the toppings that eventually satisfies 1 million people. And this is exactly the same kind of analogy that I can find, which is very difficult for us to actually build a product that satisfies all of the needs of every single customer out there.
Just build a cheese pizza.
Well, there's a lot of people that don't like cheese, but
there are more people that eat cheese than don't.
Exactly.
Doing my rumps all through Europe, and big shout out to Portugal. I'll be there soon.
We have awesome cheese. You should.
Yeah.
But the point is really that, I mean, look into the specific scenarios and use cases where eventually Sysmon would allow you to achieve what you're looking for, that out of the box, it's probably outside of our remit.
Okay.
I'll give you a good example. Is it supposed that we log every single registry change? It is important. Is it important for threat detection? Definitely not, right? Not all registry keys are born with the same level of importance or criticality from a threat intelligence point of view. Same thing for files. So there's obviously the need for the customers to understand if they have that specific requirement, or even like their own applications that eventually are even outputting events into ETW. I mean, we consume ETW providers all up from Windows, but that doesn't mean that we're going to consume their own provider. So yeah, Sysmon makes sense where it makes sense, but it has to be evaluated. It's not a yes or no question.
I like to use Sysmon in a way that you would use honey tokens, honeypots, taps. It doesn't have to be deployed everywhere. Maybe strategically on a certain machine.
Yeah.
Right. And I like it. One last question. I'm handing over to Frank. Frank, I promise I'll be done. I'm going to change the way we close out our stuff by not asking a typical question and getting our visitors in trouble with the product group and engineering. But I'm asking a different way that's going to get you in trouble with the product group and engineering. You have 5 products. Probably want to make note of this: Sentinel, MCAS, MDO, MDI, MDE.
Okay.
You can only keep 4. Who is leaving?
Wow.
Who's been voted off the island?
Wow, that depends of what else does the customer have.
No, depends. You just have to make the decision.
I'm going to get in trouble, but obviously I'll start with MDE.
That's to stay or to get off the island?
No, that's to stay.
Okay,
so how many you had there? Was it?
I'll say it again: Sentinel.
Yep.
Microsoft Cloud App Security, Microsoft Defender for Office, Microsoft Defender for Identity, and Microsoft Defender for Endpoint.
Okay.
There's 5 candidates on the island. Somebody must be voted off.
And how many can remain?
4.
So only one has to leave, right?
One has to leave.
Well, sorry, Sentinel, but I would say, I mean, I first would like to have all of those workloads pumping in the important threat
intelligence. He's trying to make it up to Sentinel right now. Listen to him.
Yeah, there you go. Like everything pumping up into then Sentinel, but first having all of the necessary components underneath. So it's like building the car. Like Sentinel is going to give you all of that nice dashboards and instrumentation of the car, but without having the wheels and the engine and everything else, the exhaust pipeline, it doesn't make sense.
Let me tell you the correct answer. You actually vote off MCAS. That's the correct answer.
I see a specific love for MCAS there.
That's absolutely not the right answer. That's all the questions that I have, Antonio. This has been hugely informative, and rather than getting super geeky and technical, we got technical when necessary. This is very thought leadership to say, hey, let me replay this because I need to consider some things, right? How I go about my business, right? Because sometimes sometimes the worst enemy of an organization is budget, because now they have it and now they don't know where to spend it. And then if now they get rushed, especially in government. If I don't spend it, I'm not going to get it allocated to me next year. I need to figure out what to do with it, right? So I like to go back and listen to certain podcasts. I'm gonna re-listen to this, but it was some very good points. So I wasn't being rude. I'm taking notes as I sit down. I like
That's awesome.
write it
Yeah.
so I can go back and I can do it. And one
But
of the acronyms that Frank coined a long time ago, I went and bought the domain name for it. He came up with this almost a year ago, a little bit longer. He said purpose-driven user interface.
Yeah.
I didn't
That's
come up with that, but it's a known term out
Yeah, it's a
there,
known
but-
thing. Yeah, my
Not
wife,
the way
she's
you
a
said
UX. She's a
I'm
UX designer.
calling it Pooty.
Yeah.
You got to have Pooty in your product.
But like when you asked me who I was, and I gave you a bit of an explanation of how I'm driven and trying to understand the why of things and bridging business and people and technology and all of that.
Mhm.
It shouldn't be only the lens of technology, right? Yeah. So it's very important what you said, that what is important for my business, what's important for me. That thoughtful decision and leadership decision is important in everything that people eventually do, right? So again, even the Sysmon question is eventually going back to the same logic. What's important for my business?
Mm-hmm.
And what can I actually do eventually within the boundaries or the limits of my business, like the budget, for example, that I have. So everything has to be eventually prioritized. And welcome to engineering, because that's actually like prioritization one-on-one every single day.
And now that CISOs or chief security officers, which I'm a fan of that title rather than CISO, they're getting their own independent budgets outside of CIO. And once you get budget, you have to justify budget.
Yes.
And so now they're going back and trying to really understand, which is super hard for security, ROI. TCO is okay, right? TCO is easier because you head count, technology costs, but it's hard to go prove short of you proving that you weren't compromised. Yes, here's the benefit of spending this in. You can go and see alerts all day, but I think now we're seeing a new emergence of more aware.
Yep.
But you're talking about risk management is really what you're talking about here.
It's risk management. I would never want to be a CISO, right? It's
a tough job.
It's a fuse.
Yeah.
The minute you take the job,
who does it? Yeah.
Mission Impossible is burning down. That's all it is, right? That's all it's going to happen.
I love that.
And then sometimes you get a longer fuse, and sometimes you light the firecracker and it goes off in your hand.
But I think that it's way more about how you deal with those situations, because again, first and foremost, mistakes are going to happen. We're all human beings in both ends.
Frank.
It's a machine. He's a machine. Yeah.
He's a machine.
And knowing how to deal with those compromises. I mean, we have very good examples, if you look into the couple of past months, of how organizations dealt it from a PR point of view, from a disclosure point of view, from a management of the incident, compensation, investigation, remediation, all of that, right? To me, it's really about that, like knowing that the fuse is going to blow, but how you're going to act when that fuse blows. To me, it's what really matters.
Yeah, when everybody's losing their head, how do you keep yours?
Yep.
I pull my shirt up around my neck. Right. But this has been super informative. Thank you so much. I'll allow you to close it out. If anything you want to share, but I know Frank wants to talk after the podcast. I don't have anything else, man. I really enjoyed having you on. Thank you so much for taking time out, considering the hour, and doing this. And you're always welcome to the show. You don't have to be invited. If you say, hey, there's something I want to talk to the masses, Edward, can I come on? Just give us a heads up. We'll do. We have a spot. And don't have to worry about Wednesday. If we had to move it to whatever day, we've had to do it before. And that is my alarm saying end the podcast.
All right. Until next week.
Until next week.
Thank you all. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Cheers.
See you next time. Bye-bye.